report is from an international conference that the America's Wetland Foundation sponsored that had 15 countries represented, where the largest deltas of the world came together to talk about their future. The Mississippi River Delta was sort of the model to look at. It's the 7th largest delta in the world, and it's deteriorating at one of the fastest rates.
And what does the report say as far as what is going to happen if nothing is done 100 years from now?
Well, we will end up with a landscape in Louisiana that's radically changed, and it will affect over 2 million people in Louisiana and 7 million people across the Gulf Coast. The coastal erosion will move up toward south of I-10, and most of our critical infrastructure will have to be moved north of I-10. And this will cause huge, enormous disruptions, not only in the state of Louisiana, but for the nation, who relies on the state for its oil, petrochemicals, and commodity shipments.
If nothing is done, what parishes that exist right now would be literally underwater?
Well, you look at the map, and south of I-10, there will be the lower lying areas of most parishes that will be submerged. And there are some ridges, of course, that would survive, but the question would be, would they be economically viable and insurable? And so we have to move with speed in our local communities to understand what the reality is, and then move very, very quickly to ensure that our communities survive. And one of the big findings from the report was that we have to build with nature and live with water. We can't combat what nature has done or will do by building, Mississippi levees that send the toxic chemicals down to the end of the mouth of the river and create a dead zone. These are not, any logical thinker can think that you have to reconnect the river with the wetlands for it to be healthy. And when you have a healthy wetlands, when that happens, they grow rapidly and they grow healthy because they need that nourishment and water.
You showed a picture of what could happen in 90 years. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a frightening picture. Compared to the land loss we've already suffered in Louisiana as we speak in 2011, the projections for 2100, less than a century away, show a ribbon of water from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, and that's all that would exist would be that Mississippi River with a relatively small space of land on either side of the river, and beyond that everything else is gone. That's not a map somebody just made up. That's a scientific study of what Louisiana may look like if something is not done, and probably will look like if something is not done.
It's a very significant report. It really deals with some of the tough issues that the region is facing, and it deals with them in a way that sort of removes those white elephants that were in the room, and gets people to talk about the real trade-offs that are going to be necessary.
One of the recommendations was this Building Resilient Community initiative that I'll be chairing across the Gulf Coast region. And the entire report centers around everything from energy's involvement in talking about a $14 billion impact, negative impact really on this entire region, to the kind of planning that needs to take place and the collaboration that needs to take place between the affected states, the rest of the country, and the individual communities who need to chart their own future.
It says that we're going to have to take decisive action, that the primary action is going to have to be reconnecting the river to its delta, so that the delta can be renourished and replenished and go back to its historic activity that it's now missing. It says that we're going to have to deal with adaptive management, both in the natural system and in human management, and what's going to happen to communities that are extremely vulnerable. It says that we're going to have a strong and steady funding vehicle that will make sure that the funding is going to be there for the long term, because this is a very long-term endeavor that we're about to go on. And it says that we need a central authority that will bring state, local, and federal authorities together, and that we're going to have political will and leadership to make this happen.
The state has a comprehensive plan, and we would say that Louisiana is way ahead of the mark because it's involved 3 different administrations, both Democrat and Republican. And they work on it daily, and the comprehensive plan suggests many ways, multiple lines of defense for us to get the restoration done. Now, this all obviously requires money, and our first look at money might be the BP oil spill and getting 80% of that, as our congressional delegation has said, led by Mary Landrieu. But the other result is we need a long-term funding stream if we're going to have a success in these wetlands. So we're going to have to be creative and come up with new ways to fund this for the long term.
What is the total dollar amount that's going to be required to save the wetlands?
Well, you may recall several years ago that people were talking about $14 billion, and that was for coastal restoration at that time. Coastal restoration and protection have now been added together, and the cost of that is much more. But I might say that in New Orleans for Katrina, $100 billion was spent, and we have very little of that money that was spent for coastal restoration. Why you want coastal restoration is you need those lands in front of levees, in front of structures, to buffer storms and rising tides, and to make our ecosystem healthy, of which we all rely, no matter what industry we're in or what recreation we choose. Healthy, growing wetlands is very, very critical. Dying wetlands will only erode to the point that will put pressure on our levee systems and not be a long-term solution.
Many of us who've been working on coastal wetlands in Louisiana for a long time have understood that the presence of the wetlands is vital for the communities, and I think to go out and really encourage community participation and bring information to them in terms of what they may need to consider when they make their plans and bring back their input to the process is going to be incredibly important. We're not going to be able to succeed in restoring our coast unless we have that kind of input, and also it allows us to do the tough things that we're going to need to do as we restore our coast.
We have the data in front of us. We know exactly how many losses we're going to take over the next 20 years. We know what preventative measures we can put in to adapt to these losses. We know we can save over $7 billion a year if we put in these preventative and adaptive measures. And so that path is more difficult in these economic times, but it's the right path to take.
What's your reaction to everything you've heard and seen here today?
I'm excited about it. This is the first time we've been working on America's energy coast since for about 3 or 4 years, and this is the first time that we have gathered this much inertia among all 5 states to speak with one voice on what we really need to do on the Gulf Coast.
Our problem right now is it takes 20 years from the beginning of a process to the end because there are so many agencies involved in permitting for coastal restoration. This report says in all parts of the world that there needs to be centralized authority who can act with urgency and cut through some of the red tape and the bureaucracies so that we can have solutions quickly. Quickly means money. And if we have to elongate these problems or these solutions, it's going to cost too much and no one can afford it.
That first meeting is in Lake Charles later this month, and it'll be an opportunity for the folks in Cameron and Calcasieu and Vermilion Parish to begin this process that we're talking about, having these discussions about how do we build resilient communities. And it'll be the first of more than a dozen meetings across the Gulf region in areas that are affected to talk about the issues, talk about the problems, talk about the challenges, and talk about what the individuals in their communities believe the solutions ought to be.
We're finding some great opportunities. Just had Florida here today. They flew over our wetlands for the first time, if you can imagine that. And we went 2 weeks ago and flew over the Everglades for the first time. That sharing of information is going to be hugely valuable to us for not redoing research and refinding scientific studies and working together in Congress to get our delegations the support we need.
We have a future. We have a bright future in Louisiana, but it's one that we have to chart for ourselves. We've got to be the catalyst to make sure that this nation recognizes the importance of our Gulf Coast, and particularly our Louisiana coast, to the economic viability of our country, and that we need help from the federal government, real meaningful help from the federal government, to make certain that these projections in 2100 do not become a reality.
Go to americaswetland.com and you can learn about the Blue Ribbon Resilient Communities Project, which will start in Lake Charles, hosted by Randy Roach and Lieutenant Governor Jay Darden on March 22nd and 23rd. Then we'll move to Plaquemines Parish in May. Houston after that, Terrebonne Lafourche Parish will be in Iberian St. Mary, and then Jefferson Orleans.